This is another question from the AP Physics 1 question bank. It's a free response question, an extended lab design type question on a difficult concept. For that reason, this will be done in 3 parts, 10A, 10A, 10B, and C, because they're very lengthy. So to unpack this question, the first thing we are told is that it's a disc-shaped platform. It has a known rotational inertia. And notice I'm highlighting as I go along, so I'm identifying the key parts, which will save me time. It's mounted on a fixed axle and rotates in a horizontal plane as shown above, okay? Student wishes to determine the frictional torque exerted on the platform by the axle as the platform rotates. So immediately at this point, we should be thinking, since they're the student looking for something to do with torque, we look at our formula sheet and we have this couple formulas. The net torque is I alpha, and the net torque is the sum of the torques. And we also have torque is RF sine theta. So those are the 3 we have. They've already mentioned the rotational inertia, or the moment of inertia in this particular case. So that would steer us toward this question. Notice I'm not even done reading the question. I've probably identified the formula that I'm going to use. Student has access to equipment that would usually be found in a school physics laboratory. Describe in a procedure that would use to collect data needed to find the frictional torque. So if we imagine this disc, as it were, that we're spinning, let's suppose it were set in motion and it rotated like that around that axle, and it were released, let go, it would eventually stop. It would slow down because there is friction on the axle. That friction acts like a torque, is a torque acting on the disc that would slow it down over time. So that's really ultimately what's going on. So to get at the torque, we would need the moment of inertia. Now, we'll go over this on the next slide, but you should recall that the moment of inertia is always proportional to the mass times the radius squared. Depending on what the shape is, there are different formulas, but they all have this mr squared term in them. So what that means is to determine the moment of inertia, the rotational inertia, we need to know the mass and the radius of the object. So the quantity that's going to be measured, first of all, we're going to measure the mass, and the mass has the symbol m, and we're going to use an electronic balance. So that's the quantities and the equipment. And the next thing we're going to get is we are going to measure the circumference. And I'll tell you why in a moment. Circumference, C. And to do that, we're going to use a Taylor's tape or a flexible ruler, measuring tape, etc. Now, the reason for that has to do with reducing uncertainty. You should know that measuring something larger, a larger object than a smaller object, will always yield smaller uncertainty. And here is why. Let us suppose that the radius of this is 1.0 meter. Well, if we measured the radius of it, it's 1.0 meter. And let's suppose in our device, the uncertainty in the reading error that we have with this is plus or minus 0.1 meters. That's 10%. But if we had measured the diameter, we would have gotten 2.0 meters. But it's still plus or minus that same 0.1 meter. So we've automatically cut our uncertainty in half to 5%. Well, what measurement could we use to get the radius that's even larger than the diameter? That would be the circumference. So in that particular case, we would get 6.28, and it would be plus or minus the same 0.1 meters. And that's going to be about 1.4% or some such thing. So you can see that to reduce the uncertainty, we are going to have the least uncertainty when we measure the circumference and calculate it. And of course, we know circumference is 2 pi r, and pi we can look up and know to virtually an infinite number of significant digits. So we're going to measure the circumference. So that takes care of the moment of inertia. The next one is the alpha, the angular acceleration. So the angular acceleration, we know, is delta omega over delta t, change in rotational velocity per unit time. So let's imagine now if we choose a location, say here in the back, we got a little marker on the disk, and we spin this thing, and we measure the amount of time it takes to go around and do its first cycle. So that would be the elapsed time t. That would also give us the period t. And then we could let it continue going until it stops, and every time we measure the cumulative time. Now, of course, then those delta t's would be, each delta t would be equal to the period. And what we would expect to see is that the period would decrease over time if it's, or excuse me, increase over time if it's slowing down. So we also know that if we want to get the average rotational velocity, that is going to be delta theta over delta t. Well, the delta theta, if we're doing each one rotation, is 2 pi radians, and the delta t will be that period, or this delta t here that we had like so. So what would happen is with each successive rotation, we would expect to have a decreased average velocity. Well, from one time interval to the next, we would have a different angular velocity, a change in angular velocity, which gives us a delta t and the alpha. But ultimately, what we're measuring, if we're doing one full circle the entire time, is the time. We're going to measure the time, or the period, t, with a stopwatch. Or if you prefer, we could measure the cumulative time as little t with a stopwatch. And that may be a little bit simpler. But the key thing about these experiments is that there's multiple ways you can do them. All right, so I notice I described the situation here where we kind of mark a fixed spot and we get the time. And that then will allow us to calculate, once we will be able to calculate the average velocity, then the change in angular velocity and the alpha, which will get us to I alpha. Now, so a little bit more with uncertainty. Each of these quantities, we want to be thinking about doing trials to better know the mean and to reduce the uncertainty. Not only do we reduce the uncertainty by measuring larger things, we reduce the uncertainty by taking more trials. That is always true. Because the plus or minus is a spread in the data, which is related to the standard deviation. The number of trials, n, as n increases, the standard deviation, Sx, always decreases. So when we look at taking trials here, we look at mass, the way we would do trials is we could put the object on an electronic balancer multiple times, and there may be some variance or uncertainty to that. We want to make sure we make at least 5. And the circumference, that involves judgment using an analog device. So what we're going to do for trials there is we are going to have at least 4 other persons record the times or take the times. The reason for that is if repeating this experiment would be difficult, number one, to get it going with the same initial velocity. So to do it again yourself over time would create a problem, not only because it's difficult to get it launching, but you might tend to give it the, measure the circumference. Oh, excuse me, we're talking about the circumference here. If we're talking about the circumference, if we measure it ourselves and do it again, we have what's called memory bias. We may remember it was 24.56 centimeters. So when we see it again, even if we wouldn't have read it 24.56, we will see it as and write it as 24.56. So that's something called memory bias, and to eliminate that, we have at least 4 other persons do that measurement for us. Now that problem doesn't repeat itself when it comes to the time. So if we want trials with the time, what we would best off doing is having 5 different persons take the time on that one time we rolled the disc. So that's how we could go about doing that, and we need to turn that into prose as succinctly as possible. I just want to flip over to the next slide. Now this slide shows here the different rotational inertias or moments of inertia that are known. If we know what the object is and its shape, we can calculate its rotational inertia, its moment of inertia. Those things that have axes that are spinning around something round are always in the form of mr squared. So if it's a thin cylinder or a thin hoop, it's a 1 mr squared. If it's a ring like ours is, it's going to be m over 2 r squared, and basically an average of the r squareds there. And of course, with ours, since it's very filled in, very, very much inside this, these two numbers are going to be pretty. There's going to be a big difference between those two numbers. But anyway, there's a formula for each of these different shapes. You do not need to know them. They are, if this were a calculus-based course, we might derive those. And you might frequently do this in a calculus course to derive these equations, but you would either be given them by the AP or you don't need to know them, but you just need to know that all forms of these spherical or round objects revolving around an axis, the round part is revolving around the axis, are going to be proportional to mr squared. In cases where we have spherical objects or circular objects like this particular here, this thin rod, the rotation is not through the long axis, it's through this linear axis. So its equation doesn't look anything like mr squared. But for our rotational purposes, things with axes that run where the circular part is going around them, we get the mr squared.